The stormy night was closing in around me like a shroud, the rain pounding against the car like a relentless drumbeat. I'd been driving for hours, my GPS leading me down a series of winding roads that seemed to stretch on forever. But it was the flat tire that did me in, stranded on the side of the road, miles from the nearest town, with nothing but the darkness for company. As I sat there, trying to get my bearings, the storm seemed to intensify. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the empty landscape like a burst of strobe light. I fumbled for my phone, hoping to get a signal, but it was dead.
I was completely cut off from the world. That's when I saw it, a flickering neon sign in the distance, beckoning me like a lighthouse in the darkness.
The words Eagle Crest Inn danced across the sign, but it was the dilapidated building behind it that caught my attention. The motel looked like it had seen better days. Peeling paint, broken shutters, and a general air of neglect that made me wonder if I'd made a mistake. But I was tired, so tired. I'd been driving for hours, and the thought of finding a place to rest was all that kept me going. I pulled into the motel's parking lot, my headlights illuminating the reception area. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside, shaking the rain from my jacket. The receptionist was a quiet, pale man with dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he'd been up for days, and his gaze was fixed on some point beyond me. Without looking up, he slid a rusted key across the counter and whispered, "Room 313. I didn't think much of it. I was just happy to have a place to sleep. The hallway was long and narrow, the wallpaper peeling like old skin. The smell of damp wood and old smoke hung in the air, making my stomach turn. I made my way to room 313, my feet echoing off the walls. As I reached the door, I noticed something odd. The brass number plate was scratched, almost as if someone had tried to remove it. Inside, the room was simple, but strangely cold. The window was sealed shut, and there were deep marks on the floor near the bed, like something heavy had been dragged across it. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I threw my bag down on the bed and sat on the edge of it. Then I saw it, a small leather-bound diary lying on the bedside table. I picked it up, flipping through the yellowed pages. Each entry described the same day. Someone arriving at this motel, checking into room 313, and never leaving. The handwriting was desperate, frantic. The last page made my skin crawl. It read, "If you're reading this, you've already checked in, and soon you'll understand." A sudden knock on the door made me jump. I opened it slowly. No one there, but at the end of the hallway, a figure stood motionless under the dim light. It looked like me. Same jacket, same shoes, same face, staring silently before vanishing into the dark. I slammed the door shut, my heart pounding, and backed away. I grabbed my phone to call for help. No signal. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. I lit the flashlight and pointed it toward the mirror on the wall. My reflection stared back, but its mouth began to move independently, whispering something I couldn't hear. Slowly, words appeared on the misty glass, drawn by invisible hands. "You checked in. Now it's my turn to leave." The room grew colder. The door creaked open by itself. My reflection smiled faintly and stepped out of the mirror. The flashlight fell to the floor. The last thing I saw before everything went black was myself, or rather the thing wearing my face, calmly picking up my bag and walking out of room 313. I'm not sure how long I was out. When I came to, the room was dark, and the only sound was the rain pounding against the window. I stumbled out of bed, my head spinning, and staggered to the door. It was unlocked, and the room was empty. But as I looked around, I saw something that made my blood run cold. On the bedside table, the diary was open to a new page, and the handwriting was mine. The next morning, the motel receptionist looked up as another tired traveler walked in, soaked from the rain. He handed him a rusted key and said quietly, "Room 313. I watched from across the room, my heart racing with a sense of foreboding. Who was this new guest, and what lay in store for them? As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, and for a moment I thought I saw something else there, a shadowy figure lurking just beyond the edge of my reflection. I shook my head, trying to clear the cobwebs. It was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But as I walked out into the bright sunlight, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd left something behind in room 313, something that was waiting for me patiently when I returned. The haunting hallway. I stepped out of the rain into the dimly lit motel lobby. The receptionist handed me a rusted key without looking up, his eyes sunken like two dark wells. Without thinking, I took the key and headed for my room. It was almost midnight, and I just wanted to sleep. As I walked down the hallway, the flickering fluorescent lights overhead seemed to dance in sync with the rain outside. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood and old smoke. I'd been driving for hours, and the flat tire had finally given out.
I just wanted to find a place to rest. The door to my room, 313, was at the far end of the hall.
I inserted the key into the lock, turned it, and pushed the door open. The room was simple, with a single bed and a small dresser, but something felt off. It was cold, a cold that seemed to seep into my bones. I looked around, trying to figure out what was wrong. That's when I saw it. A small leather-bound diary lying on the bedside table. It was old, the cover worn and cracked. I picked it up, feeling a shiver run down my spine. As I flipped through the pages, I realized that each entry described the same day. Someone arriving at this motel, checking into room 313, and never leaving. The handwriting was desperate, frantic. It was as if the writer was trying to warn someone, but I wasn't sure who. The last page made my skin crawl. It read, "If you're reading this, you've already checked in, and soon you'll understand." I felt a chill run down my spine. What did this mean? Who was writing this diary, and why was it in my room? I looked around, trying to shake off the feeling of unease. That's when I saw the number plate on the door. It was scratched, almost as if someone had tried to remove it. I wondered if this was connected to the diary, or if it was just a coincidence. As I stood there, trying to make sense of it all, I heard a knock on the door. I froze, my heart racing. I opened it slowly, but there was no one there, or was there? I looked down the hallway, and that's when I saw it. A figure standing motionless under the dim light. It looked like me. Same jacket, same shoes, same face, staring silently before vanishing into the dark. I slammed the door shut, my heart pounding in my chest. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. I lit the flashlight, shining it toward the mirror on the wall. My reflection stared back, but its mouth began to move independently, whispering something I couldn't hear. Slowly, words appeared on the misty glass, drawn by invisible hands. "You checked in. Now it's my turn to leave." The room grew colder. The door creaked open by itself. My reflection smiled faintly and stepped out of the mirror. The flashlight fell to the floor. The last thing I saw before everything went black was myself, or rather, the thing wearing my face, calmly picking up my bag and walking out of room 313. I'm still trying to make sense of what happened, but one thing is certain. I'll never forget the night I stayed in room 313, and I'll never forget the feeling of unease that lingered long after I left. But there's one question that keeps haunting me. What happened to the person who wrote that diary? And what was the meaning behind those cryptic words? I may never find the answers, but I'll keep searching, because sometimes the only way to understand the truth is to face the darkness head on. The question is, will I ever be able to face it again? The thought sends a shiver down my spine. I know one thing for sure. I'll never look at a motel room the same way again. And I'll never forget the haunting hallway of room 313, the diary's dark secret. I'm still trying to process what I found in that diary. It's like my mind is stuck in a never-ending loop, replaying the same terrifying moments over and over. Every entry describes someone checking into this motel, room 313, and never leaving. The handwriting was frantic, like the writer was racing against time to get their thoughts down on paper. At first, I thought it was just some crazy person's journal, but the more I read, the more I realized that these entries were connected. They all shared the same theme: someone arriving at the motel, checking in, and disappearing. The last entry made my skin crawl. It read, "If you're reading this, you've already checked in, and soon you'll understand." I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, telling myself it was just a creepy old diary, but the words kept echoing in my mind, making me wonder if I was already trapped in this motel. The more I read, the more I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. That's when I heard the knock on the door. I opened it slowly, expecting to see someone standing there, but there was no one. Or was there? A figure stood at the end of the hallway, motionless under the dim light. It looked like me. Same jacket, same shoes, same face, staring silently before vanishing into the dark. I slammed the door shut, heart pounding, and backed away. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. I lit the flashlight and pointed it toward the mirror on the wall. My reflection stared back, but its mouth began to move independently, whispering something I couldn't hear. Slowly, words appeared on the misty glass, drawn by invisible hands. "You checked in. Now it's my turn to leave." The room grew colder. The door creaked open by itself. My reflection smiled faintly and stepped out of the mirror. The flashlight fell to the floor. The last thing I saw before everything went black was myself, or rather the thing wearing my face, calmly picking up my bag and walking out of room 313. I'm not sure how long I was out. When I came to, the lights were back on, and the room was spotless. The diary was still on the bedside table, but the last page was blank. I stumbled out of the room, looking for answers. The receptionist was nowhere to be found, but a note on the counter read, "Room 313 is no longer available. Please check in at the next room down the hall." I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that I had no idea what was going on. Was I the latest victim of this motel's dark secret? Or was I somehow still alive? I walked down the hall, my heart pounding in my chest, and knocked on the door of the next room. The voice on the other side whispered, "Welcome to room 312. You'll never leave." I froze, my mind racing with questions. Who was behind this? What was the purpose of this twisted game?
And what lay in store for me in room 312?
I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and opened the door. What I found inside would change everything. As I stepped into room 312, I was met with an eerie silence. The air was thick with an otherworldly presence, and I could feel eyes watching me from the shadows. I fumbled for my flashlight, casting flickering beams around the room. That's when I saw it. A series of Polaroid photos stuck to the wall, each one showing a different person's face. They were all familiar, friends, family members, even strangers I'd met on the road. But it was the last photo that made my blood run cold. It was a picture of me standing in front of the motel, a sly smile spreading across my face. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that I was trapped in a never-ending cycle of terror with no escape in sight. The game was far from over, and I was about to find out that the ultimate horror was not the motel itself, but the darkness that lurked within its walls. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, frozen, my heart still racing from the sudden knock on the door. At first I thought it might have been the wind, the creaky old motel, trying to let me know it was still standing. But when I opened the door, there was no one there. The hallway was empty. The only sound, the faint hum of the flickering neon sign outside. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. It was probably just my imagination playing tricks on me. I had been driving for hours, and the exhaustion was starting to catch up with me. But as I looked down the hallway, my eyes landed on a figure standing motionless at the end of the corridor. It was hard to make out any features in the dim light, but something about the way the figure was standing sent a shiver down my spine. For a few moments, we just stared at each other, me frozen in the doorway, and the figure didn't move, didn't blink. It was like he was a statue, a replica of myself standing at the end of the hallway. I felt a wave of unease wash over me, my mind racing with questions. Who was this guy? What did he want? But before I could take another step, he vanished into thin air. The sudden disappearance left me feeling disoriented and confused. I stumbled backward, my eyes scanning the hallway as if expecting him to reappear at any moment. But there was nothing, just an empty corridor, a few flickering lights, and the sound of my own ragged breathing. I slammed the door shut, my heart pounding in my chest. What just happened? I tried to call for help, but my phone had no signal. The room was plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the small flashlight I had left on the bedside table. I lit it up, shining it toward the mirror on the wall. My reflection stared back at me, but its mouth began to move independently, whispering something I couldn't hear. I felt a chill run down my spine as I watched, transfixed. Slowly, words began to appear on the misty glass, drawn by invisible hands.
You checked it?
Now it's my turn to leave. The message sent a shiver down my spine. What did it mean? And who was behind it? The room grew colder, the air thickening with an eerie presence.
I felt like I was being watched, like unblinking eyes were trained on me from the shadows.
The door creaked open by itself, the sound sending a jolt of fear through me. I tried to step back, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. My reflection smiled faintly, and then it stepped out of the mirror. I watched in horror as it calmly picked up my bag and walked out of room 313. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the figure disappearing into the darkness, leaving me alone in the cold, dark room. The next morning, the motel receptionist looked up as another tired traveler walked in, soaked from the rain. He handed him a rusted key and said quietly, "Room 313. I wonder if he knew what was waiting for him in that room, or if he even cared. The thought sends a shiver down my spine as I sit here, trying to make sense of what happened. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that I don't want to know the truth. I just want to get out of here, to leave this place behind and never look back." But as I stand up, my eyes land on the small leather-bound diary on the bedside table. The same diary I found when I first arrived, the one that described the same day, the same room, and the same. I feel a wave of dread wash over me as I realize that I'm not just a guest in this motel, but I'm a part of it, and I have a feeling that I'm not going to be able to leave anytime soon. The darkness that had enveloped me was total. The only sound, the creaking of the old motel's wooden floorboards beneath my feet. I tried calling for help, but my phone refused to budge. The screen remained stubbornly blank, the words "no service" mocking me like a cruel joke. Panic began to set in as I realized I was truly alone here, with no way to call for rescue. As I stood there, frozen in fear, the lights flickered once, twice, and then died completely, plunging me into an inky blackness that seemed to have a life of its own. I fumbled for my flashlight, clicked it on, and pointed it toward the mirror on the wall. My reflection stared back at me, its eyes seeming to bore into my very soul. But something was off. The light from the flashlight seemed to make things worse, like it was highlighting some hidden truth that I didn't want to see. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself I was just spooked from the events of the past few hours. But as I looked closer, I saw that my reflection's mouth was moving, whispering something I couldn't quite hear. And then, in the misty glass of the mirror, words began to appear, drawn by some invisible hand. "You checked in," they read. "Now it's my turn to leave." A chill ran down my spine as I realized that I was trapped in some kind of sick game, one where the lines between reality and nightmare were getting increasingly blurred. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, telling myself that I was just imagining things. But as I looked closer at my reflection, I saw that its smile was faint, almost sad. And then, in a movement that seemed to defy the laws of physics, it stepped out of the mirror and began to walk toward me. My heart was racing, my mind reeling, as I tried to make sense of what was happening. I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet, as I desperately tried to get away from myself. Was that even possible? And yet, as I looked down at the thing wearing my face, I knew that I was staring at something that was both familiar and yet completely alien. The last thing I remembered was the sound of my own voice, whispering a single word, "No," and then everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, my head throbbing with pain. The room was quiet, the only sound the distant hum of a car driving by outside. I sat up slowly, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of whatever it was that had happened. But there was nothing. The room was empty, the door closed, and the mirror on the wall was just a mirror. I stumbled to my feet, my mind reeling as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. And as I looked down at my phone, I saw that the screen was still blank, still refusing to budge. But then, something caught my eye. A small piece of paper tucked away in the corner of the bedside table. I picked it up, my heart racing as I read the words scrawled on it. You're not who you think you are, and you're definitely not where you think you are. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead as I realized that I was trapped in some kind of nightmare from which I couldn't wake up, and as I looked around the room, I knew that I was running out of time. The darkness that had engulfed me was total. The only sound, the creaking of the old motel's wooden floorboards beneath my feet. My mind was racing with questions. How did I get here? And why did it feel like I'd been trapped all along? I tried calling for help, but my phone refused to budge. The screen remained stubbornly blank, the words "no service" mocking me like a cruel joke. Panic began to set in as I fumbled in the darkness, desperate to find a light source. My hand closed around the flashlight on the bedside table, and I managed to flick it on. The beam of light cast eerie shadows on the walls as I scanned the room. That's when I saw it, my reflection, staring back at me from the mirror. I shone the light directly at my reflection, and what I saw made my blood run cold. It moved. My reflection's mouth opened and closed as if it was trying to speak, but took a step closer, my heart pounding in my chest. The words on the glass began to take shape, a message scrawled by invisible hands. I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the words. You checked in.
Now it's my turn to leave.
The room seemed to grow colder, the air thickening with an unseen presence. I tried to process what was happening, but my mind was reeling. Was this some kind of prank, hallucination, brought on by the stress and fear of being trapped? But the words on the glass seemed so real, so urgent. As I stood there, frozen in horror, the door creaked open by itself. My reflection smiled faintly and stepped out of the mirror. The flashlight fell to the floor, casting the room in darkness once more. I was left standing there, staring at the empty space where my reflection had been. The last thing I saw before everything went black was myself, or rather, the thing wearing my face, calmly picking up my bag and walking out of room 313. I collapsed to the floor, my mind reeling with questions and fears. What was happening to me? Was I losing my mind? And what lay beyond walls of this godforsaken motel? As I lay there, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pulled into some kind of twisted game, a game where the rules were unclear and the stakes were my very sanity. I knew I had to get out of there, to find help and escape this living nightmare. But as I struggled to my feet, I realized that I was trapped in a world where the lines between reality and madness were blurred, and the only constant was fear. The darkness closed in around me, and I stumbled forward, desperate to find a way out. But the door slammed shut behind me, and I was plunged into total darkness. I was alone, and I was lost. The last thing I heard was the sound of my own voice whispering back at me. You checked in. Now it's my turn to leave. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, frozen, my heart still racing from the sudden knock on the door. At first, I thought it might have been the wind, the creaky old motel trying to let me know it was still standing. But when I opened the door, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A figure stood motionless under the dim light, staring at me with an unblinking gaze. It looked like me. Same jacket, same shoes, same face, staring silently before vanishing into the dark. I slammed the door shut, heart pounding, and backed away. I grabbed my phone to call for help. No signal. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. As I stood there, trying to make sense of what was happening, I realized that I was trapped in a never-ending cycle of fear and uncertainty. a cycle that seemed to be spiraling out of control, with no escape in sight. And at the center of it all was the mirror, a portal to another world, where my reflection was trying to tell me something.
But what?
The words on the glass still echoed in my mind. You checked in. Now it's my turn to leave. But what did they mean? Was I trapped in some kind of supernatural loop, doomed to repeat the same events forever? Or was there something more sinister at play? A malevolent force that was manipulating me, using me for its own twisted purposes. I didn't know, but I knew one thing for sure. I had to get out of there. I had to find a way to break free from this living nightmare and reclaim my life. But as I looked around the dark, deserted hallway, I realized that I was alone, and I was running out of time. I stepped out of the darkness, my eyes adjusting to the faint glow of the flashlight. The room was still, except for the sound of my own ragged breathing. My reflection stared back at me from the mirror, a faint smile spreading across its face. And then, it happened. My reflection stepped out of the mirror, its smile growing wider as it moved closer to me. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The flashlight fell to the floor with a thud, plunging me into total darkness. I felt like I was drowning in an ocean of blackness. Panic set in, my mind racing with questions. What was happening?
Why was my reflection doing this?
And what did it mean? As I stumbled backward, desperate to escape, I caught a glimpse of something that made my blood run cold. My reflection calmly reached down, picked up my bag, and slung it over its shoulder. It was walking out of the room, out of my life, and I was powerless to stop it. The image seared itself into my brain like a branding iron. I was trapped in this nightmare, with no escape in sight. The darkness closed in around me, suffocating me with its crushing weight. I was alone, with only my own thoughts to keep me company. And the worst part was, I knew that I was being watched. The silence was oppressive, heavy with an unspoken threat. I strained my ears, listening for any sound that might indicate my reflection was still in the room. But there was nothing, only the creaking of the old motel's wooden floorboards beneath my feet, a reminder that I was still trapped in this living hell. As I stood there, frozen in terror, I realized that I had to keep moving. I had to find a way out of this room, out of this motel, and back into the world. But how? The door was still open, its hinges creaking softly in the wind. I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. And then, I stopped. What if I walked out into the same darkness that had consumed me? What if I followed my reflection into the unknown? I hesitated, my foot hovering above the threshold. And then, I made a decision. I would follow my reflection, no matter where it led. I would confront the truth about room 313 and the sinister force that lurked within its walls. I took a deep breath, steeled myself for what lay ahead, and stepped out into the unknown. The darkness closed in around me like a shroud, but I didn't falter. I kept moving, driven by a desperate need to uncover the truth. And as I walked, the silence began to take on a new form. It was no longer just a void of sound, but a presence that watched me, waited for me, and whispered its secrets in my ear. The air was thick with tension, heavy with anticipation. I knew that I was being led deeper into the heart of the mystery, farther into the abyss of room 313. And I was ready. I was ready to face whatever lay ahead, no matter the cost. But as I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being herded toward some terrible fate. That my reflection was leading me to a destination from which there was no return. And the thought sent a shiver down my spine. What lay at the end of this journey? Was it freedom, or was it something far more sinister? You've got to wonder if anyone's been paying attention to the warning signs. I've been trapped in this never-ending nightmare, and it seems like I'm not the only one. The receptionist hands another traveler a key to room 313, completely unaware of the horrors that await him. Just like Daniel, this guy looks tired, soaked from the rain. He's probably just looking for a place to rest, but little does he know, he's about to enter a world of terror. As I sit here, reflecting on my own experiences, I can't help but feel a sense of dread. I've been trying to piece together the events that led me to this motel, but the more I think about it, the more I realize that I'm trapped in a cycle of fear. It's like I'm stuck in a never-ending loop, reliving the same moments over and over. I'm starting to wonder if anyone will ever escape this place. The receptionist's words echo in my mind. Room 313. It's like a mantra, a reminder of the terror that awaits. I've seen it firsthand, and I know that no one is immune to its grasp. The room seems to have a mind of its own, drawing people in with its promise of rest and comfort. But once you're inside, there's no escape. I've tried to warn others to scream for help, but it's like I'm trapped in a silent scream. The only sound is the creaking of the old motel's wooden floorboards beneath my feet. It's a sound that's become all too familiar, a reminder of the darkness that surrounds me. The traveler looks up at the receptionist, taking the key and nodding silently. He's probably just grateful to have a place to stay, but little does he know, he's about to enter a world of terror. I can only imagine what he'll go through, the fear that will grip him as he realizes that he's not alone in the room. He'll see things, hear things, and soon he'll be just like me, trapped in this never-ending nightmare. As I sit here in the darkness, I can feel the weight of my own fear. It's a feeling that's become all too familiar, a reminder of the terror that awaits. I'm not sure how much longer I can hold on, but I know that I have to keep going. I have to find a way out of this place, no matter what it takes. The traveler's footsteps echo down the hallway, growing fainter with each step. He's getting closer to room 313, and I can only imagine what he'll find when he gets there. Will he survive, or will he become the next victim of this twisted game? I can only hope that he'll make it out alive, but deep down, I know that he won't be so lucky. As the darkness closes in around me, I'm left with only one thought. What's next? Will I be the next victim, or will I find a way to escape this place? The answer, much like the truth, remains a mystery, waiting to be uncovered. The diary's warning. I've been thinking a lot about that diary, and I'm starting to realize that it was more than just a warning. It was a warning that I ignored. I thought it was just some crazy person's ramblings, but now I see the truth. The diary was trying to tell me that room 313 was a death trap, and I was the next victim. I checked in anyway, thinking I was safe, but I was wrong. As I flipped through those yellowed pages, I saw the same horror unfold again and again. Someone would arrive at the motel, check into room 313, and never leave. The handwriting was desperate, frantic, like the person writing it knew they were running out of time. And then I read the last page, the one that made my skin crawl. It said, "If you're reading this, you've already checked in, and soon you'll understand." I tried to shake it off, but the words kept echoing in my mind. And then the knock on the door. No one was there, but I saw myself standing at the end of the hallway, staring silently before vanishing into the dark. I slammed the door shut, heart pounding, and backed away. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. I lit the flashlight and pointed it toward the mirror on the wall. My reflection stared back, but its mouth began to move independently, whispering something I couldn't hear. Slowly, words appeared on the misty glass, drawn by invisible hands. You checked in.
Now it's my turn to leave. The room grew colder.
The door creaked open by itself. My reflection smiled faintly and stepped out of the mirror. The last thing I saw before everything went black was myself, or rather the thing wearing my face, calmly picking up my bag and walking out of room 313. I've been trying to piece together what happened next, but it's like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. I stumbled upon a news article about a series of unexplained disappearances at the Eagle Crest Inn. The police were stumped, but one thing stood out. Every single victim had checked into room 313. I realized that I wasn't the first, and I won't be the last. The diary was right. I checked in, and now it's my turn to leave. But I'm not going to go quietly into the night. I'm going to find a way to escape this motel, to break the curse that's been cast over room 313. I'm going to uncover the truth behind the disappearances, and I'm going to make sure that no one else falls victim to the Eagle Crest Inn's deadly cycle. I'm running out of time, but I'm not giving up. I'm going to fight to survive, to uncover the secrets hidden in these walls. And if you're listening to this, if you're wondering what happened to me, know this: I'm still here, trapped in this nightmare, and I'm not alone. The question is, will I make it out alive? As I lay in the darkness, my mind racing with the events of the night before, I knew I had to get out of this place. I had to find a way to escape. But every door I opened led to more terror, more confusion. I searched every corner of the motel, scoured every inch of the rooms, but there was nothing. Just a maze of identical doors, each one leading to a new nightmare. I stumbled upon a room that seemed untouched, the bed unmade, the air thick with the scent of fresh towels. But as I approached the dresser, I saw a piece of paper clutched in the drawer handle. It was a receipt dated years ago, but the name on it sent a chill down my spine. Emily Wilson, room 313, the same room I'd been trapped in. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. Was I the only one still here? I began to search the motel's history, scouring old newspapers and dusty records. What I found shocked me. This place had a dark history, a record of guests who never checked out. They just vanished. The authorities never found any evidence of foul play, just a string of mysterious disappearances. And then there were the rumors, whispers of a cursed place, a portal to another dimension. I laughed it off as superstition, but now I wasn't so sure. As I delved deeper into the motel's past, I started to realize that I wasn't alone. There were others trapped here with me. I could feel their presence, a faint whisper in the darkness. I heard footsteps outside my room, creaking doors in the hallway. It was as if they were searching for me, too. My heart racing, I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the hallway. The light flickered, casting eerie shadows on the wall. I moved cautiously, my senses on high alert. And then I saw it, a faint glow emanating from the room at the end of the hall. I crept closer, my heart pounding in my chest. The light grew brighter, illuminating a figure standing in the center of the room. It was a woman, her eyes fixed on me with a desperate plea for help. I froze, unsure of what to do, and then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been waiting for you," she said. "I've been waiting for someone to find me." I stepped out into the crisp morning air. the motel's neon sign, now a distant buzz, as I walked away from the horrors I had faced. The Eagle Crest Inn's dark secret was finally mine to share. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped with my life, and that room 313 still held secrets I would never fully understand. As I looked back at the motel, I remembered the diary's haunting words. If you're reading this, you've already checked in.
And soon you'll understand. I had thought it was just a desperate warning from a troubled mind, but now I saw it for what it was, a message from someone who had endured the same terrors I had.
The figure in the hallway, the reflection in the mirror, it all made sense now. The Eagle Crest Inn was more than a simple motel. It was a trap designed to ensnare unsuspecting travelers and drag them into a living nightmare. And I was lucky to have escaped. But at what cost? The horrors I experienced in that room would stay with me forever. A constant reminder of the evil that lurked in the shadows. I thought about the people who had come before me, the ones who had checked into room 313 and never left. Were they still trapped inside, their minds shattered by the same terrors I had faced? Or had they managed to break free, just like I had? I couldn't help but wonder. As I walked away from the motel, I felt a sense of responsibility wash over me. I had to share my story, to warn others about the Eagle Crest Inn and the curse that lurked within its walls. I had to make sure that no one else suffered the same fate as those who had come before me. The truth about room 313 was a heavy burden to carry, but I was determined to bear it. I would expose the motel's dark secret, and I would make sure that the world knew the truth about the Eagle Crest Inn. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of resolve wash over me. It was time to set the record straight and to finally put an end to the curse that had haunted me for so long. The question still lingered in my mind: what other secrets lay hidden within the walls of the Eagle Crest Inn, and what other terrors waited in the shadows, ready to strike? I knew that I would never be able to fully answer those questions, but I was determined to keep searching for the truth. The curse of room 313 would not win. I would make sure of it.